going to start is with a couple of stories, because I think that kind of helps us understand a little bit about what is going on in the world of care today. Because I think where I would start is that social care in Scotland is not on the edge of collapse. But actually there are some serious pinch points where things are really, really difficult, and we'll touch on some as we go through. But the first story I want to just tell you very briefly is about Ella, who's the sister of a friend of mine, and she came out of a long-stay hospital, learning disability hospital, in and around about 1999 and 2000. And Ella lives in her own flat. She's got her own house. She has 2 members of staff with her at all times. She's able to go to the theatre. Right? She's not verbal, but she enjoys the theatre, and she goes out for lunch in cafes, and this is all paid for by the state through a system called direct payments. She's an independent life after years spent institutionalised in a long-stay hospital, and is really able to benefit in some of those changes. The second story is of Louise, right, who was 55 years old and has Down syndrome in 2010, and she moved into what was called the Elsie Inglis nursing home after her mother died, and that was the appropriate place for Louise to go and live. And within a year, Louise was dead, left in bed in soiled pads until pressure sores became infected, and she was rushed to hospital when it was eventually discovered, but it was too late for Louise, and Louise died. The home also had the unenviable situation. It was a home for older people, many of whom had dementia, and the staff used to amuse themselves in time off and shifts by jumping in front of the residents and scaring them, and by and large, if any of the relatives complained, they were in effect punished by care being withdrawn from their relatives. Eventually the care inspector, after Louise's death, shut the home down and people moved on. There have been no prosecutions, right? And this is a pattern, right, which when we talk about the crisis of care, and I will talk about some of the things that people often mean about the crisis of social care, but social care in Scotland for 80 plus years has actually been dehumanising, disempowering and degrading for many of the people who have been cared for, who don't have a voice and are often not seen by. And one of my friends, Jim Elder Woodward, sent me an article last 2 nights ago called The Gulag, which people with cerebral palsy describe the care system, that once you get in it, you cannot get out of it, and that people fought hard, not for that to happen. So I will move on to now what we talk about social care, some of those crises, but when we often say we want to defend social care, we have to be aware that there's more than one perspective of what that care is like, and it is not necessarily simply underpaid staff. Actually, there's an experience that people have in that is really challenging. Now, having said that, the social care in Scotland is a huge sector. Right? It costs over £4 billion are spent on social care. 300,000 people are supported with different forms of social care services in Scotland, and there's over 200,000 people employed in social and residential care, which is 1 in 13 of people in the workforce. So actually this is a really big sector within Scotland, and 85% of those are women. Right? So this is a really important issue, right? And I would identify 3 areas that over the last 10 years have really become areas of crisis. First of all, who gets social care? 2, issues about staffing, and 3, a lack of ambition with that. And who gets care is the thing that we would most often recognise within the left and within radical circles about what is a crisis, right? It's to do with budget cuts, it's to do with services closing. I was involved in a campaign in Glasgow where drop-in centres for people with mental health issues were shut down. The Charlie Reid Centre was one. People self-organised their own help and their own support. And with the closure of that service, people actually were left without any support at all. They didn't have a formal care plan, they just simply popped in where they needed help, and now they no longer had that. And that kind of thing has gone on all over Scotland. And really the people that have lost out are those who have needed a collective service with lower levels of need. In Glasgow, for example, lots of older people managed to live a reasonable life as long as you get to the day centre 2 or 3 times a week. Glasgow decided it would raise the cost of a day service from £1 a day to £15 a day. Right? You know, you work out the maths, what that means. What the maths meant, actually, the number of people attending fell from about 600 people down to 100. Right? You know, those people didn't have replacement care packages in case they actually stayed locked behind their front doors for that. With that, social care has become masked by pseudoscience. Right? There's a thing that they use called eligibility criteria, where you assess as to whether or not your needs, where they fit on a kind of invisible continuum. If you have what's called now critical or substantial needs, you get service. If you have moderate or low needs, you get said, actually, look, there's a charity down there, there's the action group, there's the Cyclonians. Go there, you know, and they'll give you a wee bit of a helping hand. And if you have no accessible social needs, that's not saying that you have a disability or that you don't need help, but nothing that they say that they could help with, then you don't get anything, do you know, for that. So over the last 10 years, the numbers getting social care have fallen by 10,000, right? From 70,000 down to 60,000, okay? The number who are getting residential care has fallen much less, but the number of homes, so the number of getting residential care has fallen by 4%, but the number of homes have fallen by 21%. And what that means is that homes are now bigger, right? And more people are jammed together in bigger situations. So we have the biggest care home in Scotland is up in the Braid Hill Nursing Home, right? You know, which is a really, really big complex with that. It's all existing under that, and those bigger services. But also, and this is where is that people are, on average, now getting older and more vulnerable. The number of people under 70 getting social care has fallen most dramatically, right? And it's now people over 80 and 90 that get that. And the amount of time that they're getting has risen, but it's, you know, so it's keeping people in their own homes, but it does it by having 15-minute slots, 15 to 30-minute slots, right? So that means that people can get 3 or 4 visits a day by really hard-pressed staff running about to do that, and they would get that 7 days a week. So that would be your 10 hours a week would be slotted into those little sections with that. That keeps you in your own home, it keeps you alive, but it doesn't give you any quality of life with that. The real value of what councils pay for social care services has fallen by 1/3. And the reason they get away with this, right, is because while they might cut your care package, and you feel that quite badly, new people who enter the service regularly don't notice that they're getting a less of an offer than somebody, because there are no standards for this. You know, you don't. It's not like, you know, I'm going to get dialysis, right, on my kidneys, right, and I don't understand dialysis. So look, you have to get it 3 times a week, let's say, right. When it gets cut down to 2 times a week, you would notice, and your illness would there. Actually, if you only got your care in 15-minute slots now, instead of an hour slot as before, actually you're still getting to stay in your home. But you don't realise you could have got an hour before. You don't realise that the cut's there, and this is what has happened in lots of ways. And it's put incredible pressure on staff, right? Incredible pressure on staff, right? There is a real, for example, concern today. I don't necessarily need to go into this particular aspect of it, but that Brexit is going to cause particular problems with the end of free movement. Is rough between 10 and 13% of those numbers of care workers are from other European countries, and many of them have already started to leave. 1 in 4 nursing posts in care homes are vacant. Turnover in social care is about 1/3. That's 1/3 of all staff working in social care leave every year, right? With that, and I'm not going to go through all these, but 62% of care home services have vacancies. You know, housing support services have 59% have a vacancy. Do you know, they're under pressure. And when I entered, I went to work in social care when I was very young, right? And the wages then were actually just about the same as a qualified social worker, right? Now they're 5% more than the minimum wage, right? You know, where the qualified levels have gone up. So lots of those lots of people use entering into social care as a way of getting a bit of experience and then going off to get, you know, a better paid job with that, and done that. And but there are no shortage. So for this is a figure that you might not, nobody knows this one, right? That for every 2 applications to a social care job, 1 of them will get a job. You know, it used to be, you know, when you apply for jobs, you think there's whole piles of people, right? If you actually get around to filling an application form in, there's a 50% chance you'll get a job. You know, that's how desperate they are to get that, you know. So we do have the problem, and I mean, it's unsupervised work. I described the story of Ella earlier. I have changed the names, by the way, for the video, right? With that, in Ella's case, there's not a manager that supervises the workers, and many other people only have 1 worker on site. And so many of the things that by most personal assistance and support workers goes fine, otherwise we wouldn't have the system that we have. But there are all sorts of problems that can go on. I'm not going to go into them just now, but there are all sorts of issues that are there, and it is a challenge, because actually independent, and this is where I'm going to come on to now, is independent living and having a say over your own life is so incredibly important to people. It's something that everybody values, you know, and as, for example, as people get older, that's still something they would like to maintain and often do that. And it's for those people who have lifelong conditions, long-term disabilities, it's no less an aspiration and to do that. But we have a crisis in a lack of ambition in councils and the NHS throughout Scotland. Now, I know that we often, on the left, go, NHS, that's really good, you know, and we should all defend it. That may be true, but actually, in many ways, for people with disabilities, the health service has actually become confused with social care, right? In a sense that actually the NHS is really good at dealing with dialysis and kidney issues, and actually helping you live a life independently within the community. It's not. And what we've seen is the rise now of care home alternatives, people saying that people like Ella's service is far too expensive, and that Ella would be better off and better served with more of her kind in her own shared home, where 2 members of staff could support 4 people and not give Ella just individual attention. Whereas the privatisation of care without imagination, I mean, so for example, Edinburgh's day services have just been not shut down, but actually transferred to a voluntary organisation to do that. In Glasgow, they've in effect shut the day services, all the day services for people with disabilities, and voluntary organisations are now providing alternatives for that. Now, those alternatives are not at the wage levels. The cases, all the staff that were involved with that, who fought, and I remember having strikers from Glasgow's day centres coming around and collecting support for themselves. They've all been transferred to different jobs, all have left, you know, and replacement staff providing the new services are at the Scottish living wage level, which is one of the Scottish Government's commitments to try and raise it up, raise the floor a bit. Because, what I failed to mention about the wages thing is actually you can work in Aldi or Lidl, and nothing wrong with working in Aldi or Lidl, but you get paid more than you do as a basic grade social care worker, you know. So I mean, I'm in favour of parity with Lidl and Aldi and everybody getting their wages raised up. But actually, why do we value the care of our vegetables and tins of tomato soup as being more than the care of our of people who have disabilities, disabled people, you know, or older people, you know, and that's the hard question. So the Scottish Government have taken a response which see themselves as enablers and not providers, and they have taken a view that what their job is to do is to create the policy environment, policy framework that allows health boards and councils to do things. But the 2 major policies have come up against a kind of brick wall with this. There's integrated joint boards. I'll just talk briefly about that, and then there's also the self-directed support. An integrated joint boards was an attempt to bring together the NHS and the social care sections of local authorities under one body. And that way, the theory was you would be able to make sure that people didn't get stuck in hospital, which is an expensive service. They were able to move into the community smoothly, and that you could make sure that people who in the community got adequate medical treatment to prevent their needs getting worse, that would then necessitate being hospitalised or having more expensive care. And so far this has failed to work. Right? The health boards have managed to dominate this. They're much, much bigger, they're much more professional. The integrated joint boards have become focused on principally on two issues. One is on bed blocking, which is, and I failed to do this is for people who are in hospital but shouldn't be in hospital, right? No longer have any health needs and should be living in the community. And they have singularly failed in almost every health area within Scotland to keep those numbers going down. They invested a lot of money to start with, they managed to get them down, and they have failed because there's just not enough money being invested in social care to manage that. And pharmacy issues is the big one. The drugs bill in Scotland continues to rise, and actually the integrated joint boards spend more time being concerned, understandably, about this rising bill than about how they resolve the community. Now, self-directed support is the idea that as an individual, no matter who gives you your care, you should be having a say over how it's managed. And as an aspiration, it's good, but actually nobody has found a way of challenging the power of local authorities over this. Most individuals do not want to be managers of a care package. Ella, who we described earlier, cannot actually manage it. Her sister has the skills and capability to manage the care package. People with physical disabilities who have taken up something keenly are happy to manage. For most people, they want to live a life. They want to be able to go to the cinema, go out with their friends, to spend their time doing the things that they value, not learning how to keep books, how to manage bank accounts, and that kind of stuff. And there is, in effect, limited real choice. And which is a shame, because in many ways in the history of the disability movement, independent living has been an aspiration that people have fought for, right from when what was called the rolling quads in the 1960s in Berkeley, first fought the idea of having care homes and demanded the right to have. They took their inspiration from the civil rights movement and demanded the right to have budgets for themselves, and won, right, in Berkeley in California. And that has inspired people all across the world ever since then to do that. With that. And the idea behind direct payments and then self-directed support has been part of the policy in Scotland, but it has yet failed to deliver any transformation. Local authorities dominant, voluntary organisations, I am on the board of one, used to work for many of them. They're very ethically sound, but in a sense, what I described earlier, it's not about the individual themselves having control. You're relying on somebody else doing it for you. And the challenge that we have is that the big victory, right, of the disability movement over the last 20 years has been the establishment of what's called the social model of disability. And this is the idea that a society that everybody has impairments. It's how society adjusts for that determines whether or not an impairment becomes a disability. Some impairments we have, Alan's got his glasses on top of his head there, a visual impairment, right, actually is so common these days that none of us think about it. In Martha's Vineyard, right, which is now a kind of holiday resort for people across America, it was originally colonised by people from Kent who had a genetic defect in hearing. And as people moved into Martha's Vineyard, sign language became so common that nobody knew that the thing deafness was a problem. Some people just didn't speak. Everybody had sign language. And it wasn't until actually, it became clear that was it. That is how an impairment is not necessarily a disability. So that's been the victory that took place over the medical model, the idea that if you had a disability, if you had, if for example, you had an impairment in your legs, then that was a disability. Actually, you can have a wheelchair, you can have a powered wheelchair, you can have not steps, but actually, ramps that take you up, you can have accessible lifts. All those things mean actually, there's no problem. In Scotland today, we're still in a position where people have to fundraise for wheelchairs. A friend of mine is right now trying to raise £24,000 to buy a stair climbing wheelchair. You know, these things, you know, are available, but they're not available for you. But the challenge, and this is the fourth crisis, right, is the growth of what's called the biopsychological model, right? And most of you will be familiar with this, because this is what is used to justify the work capability assessment and the personal investment assessments, which I'm not going to go into great detail about those. That's something for another issue or for another meeting altogether. But the idea is that as an individual, you can make better choices than the collective can, and that if you have a disability, it's because, and you're not making the most of it, it's because you have a psychological challenge that you need to be encouraged out of. Right? So the idea behind giving people sanctions is that actually, because you need to realise that your own actions are serious. It's not enough just to get disability. Some people get to the interview on time. Why don't you? You know, and so that is part of what the bio. It's putting the responsibility back on the individual. It says, yes, you've got a disability. These are real things, but it's how you respond to it, right? And in some ways, when I talk about the self-directed support, the challenge is that it's the same thing. It's part of that movement, which says, as an individual, you can make better choices than as a collective can. You know, even disabled people collectively. You know, as an individual, you can do that. And that is a real challenge that lies behind that. Now, many of the advances in the disability movement have been linked to struggle, right? I've mentioned some of them, but ones that are familiar to us in Britain include the improvements in accessible transport and buses that took place in London, when actually people with disability began to chain themselves to the front of buses and just stop the buses moving. Do you know? We even did a wee bit of that in Edinburgh at one point. And sometimes it's direct action, sometimes it's legal action that does that, help make a voice. I mean, more recently we've had big battles over what's called the Independent Living Fund in England, where disabled people have taken on and challenged the government over this. Unfortunately, in the end, in England losing, but in Scotland we had the creation of just promises from the Scottish Government, from Nicola Sturgeon in particular, the creation of what's called the Scottish Independent Living Fund, which guarantees those payments. I'll not really go into that in any detail. What I want to just finish with now is two things. One is about Frank's Law, which I suppose one of the reasons why I'm on here, Frank, you know, is that I was in the telly, right? Because we at the start of April, Frank's Law was introduced, which extended free personal care to people under 65. We've had free personal care for people over 65 since 2002 with that. And it's called Frank's Law because Amanda Coppell has run single-handedly, believe it or not, a campaign around Scotland that has mobilised thousands to wear Frank's Law's t-shirts, to stand in football terraces with banners saying time for Frank's Law. Now, Frank Coppell was a football player for Dundee United and Manchester United, and incredibly well known in the time. And in the 1960s, people headed footballs, big, heavy, wet leather footballs with that. And dementia, vascular dementia, was the result for many. And Frank developed early onset dementia when he was 59, and had to pay for his personal care for that. And at one point, Frank had to sell his Manchester's Busby Babes blazer and cap and tie, so to pay the mortgage, because he had to pay the care charges with that. Now, when people that bought that found out, they gave them back to Frankie before he died. Even though we've won this, Dundee Council has never given a penny back to Frank's family for this, right? Now, we're all in favour of Frank's Law, we're all in favour of the extension of free personal care, but it is one of the unknown aspects that people on state benefits in Scotland, and nothing but state benefits in Scotland, right, can pay up to £90 a week for their social care. So it's not free in Scotland. A friend of mine called Jeff, who developed a disability in his 40s, has a full pension from BT. He has to pay £178 a week a week, right? £608 a month for his social care for that. So the extension of free personal care promises a lot for people. But of the 20,000 people who get this particular home care aspect of it, only 1/3 will get that. And in Jeff's case, he gets 80 hours a week of care. His personal assistants, he will travel. He's the chair of Lothian Centre for Inclusive Living. He speaks at conferences with that. The council has decided that the time that his personal assistant is with him outside the building, but not helping him into the toilet, is not personal care. Right? Even though he can't go anywhere without having somebody to attend to him. So they have said that of his 80 hours, only 64 are personal care and 16 are non-personal care. And what does Jeff have to pay now? Right, well, there's no point in guessing. It's £178 a week. There is no change in Jeff's social care payment despite this coming in. And this will be the case for many of the others, and which is why we're making the argument on that. And already we have stories of people turning down services who thought they were going to get things. They're offered a service, but they're told what you're getting is not personal care. So in Falkirk and in Glasgow, we already have stories of people who only need a few hours of support. That vulnerable, slightly more needs than the vulnerable group I talked about at the Charlie Reid Centre, but who the council say, you need support, and we will give it to you, but you have to pay for it. I say, actually being a choice of paying for my bills and my food, or getting the social care, I'll struggle on, do you know, with that. And that's going to happen, and we think that will happen more and more. So, we are wanting to conclude, since this is a radical independence campaign, and we're talking about what kind of changes we might like for Scotland, I think there's three things that I think that would be really important. First of all, is that there should actually be a national care agency. Actually, the idea that you should get a different offer of care if you live in Clackmannanshire from what if you live in Falkirk, if you live in Edinburgh, depending on what the local priorities of councils are, is wrong. Do you know? Actually, there should be a national offer, you know, with clear rights and entitlements for that, you know. And a number of people have argued for that, and that's quite a popular idea within the disability movement. The second thing is it's actually important to challenge and to break decision-making monopolies of doctors, psychiatrists, social workers and lawyers. In Scotland, you can be locked up for life, right, for minor offences, right, without a trial, not able to leave a state hospital or the other institution except on the word of a psychiatrist, right, because they have to say that they are confident that you might never do this again. And there are people who have been for untold lengths of time in hospital for minor offences that for anybody else would have gone through the court system and done that. One of the things about self-directed support that I didn't mention was that the big beneficiaries from this are lawyers, right? Because councils are saying, now that you're responsible for your own care, we don't think you're fit to manage it. Somebody has to have guardianship over you. And guardianship has been taken out on a case amount. That means that somebody else has a full legal responsibility for deciding what happens to your life with that. And so we think there's a real importance to challenge those models. It's not that they don't have important roles to play, but these should not be the only decision makers in these things, you know. And the voices of the disabled people themselves must have a role. And this final one is actually that all agencies working in social care and with disabled people actually have 50% of board members who are disabled and 50% of employees, right, who are disabled people with social care users. Actually, and these are things that actually take place in some parts of the world. These are not things that are just off the wall. These are things that can actually help to make a real difference. So I'll leave it at that. I mean, as I say at the start, that social care in Scotland is not at a point of class, but it is at a point when there are serious areas of crisis within that, for those that use services, for those that work in it, and those that rely on it. Thanks.